Hi, I'm Cam Satrowski. Welcome to Open Source Belongs in School. Let's put it there. In the next 45 minutes, you will hear our story about how we are changing the world with open source, right from our school. What's more, you can do it too. In the last 2 years, we've talked at a lot of conferences, both in the tech world and the education world. The tech world has no trouble understanding what we do, but today we're bringing our message to your world, the education world. And we believe the right people will get this. Now, normally we do these events from school, but sometimes life gives you other plans. So the kids on this team are all doing this from home. However, we are going to treat this just like a Penguin Corps meeting back at school. So please join us in the Penguin Corps Pledge. What are we trying to do?
Change the world!
How do you change the world?
Be crazy enough to think you can!
Penguin Corps agenda. Number 1, leader. Cam calls meeting to order. Number 2, Stu Keroff, a little bit of history. Number 3, Mohammed, what we do. Number 4, Jeffrey, our case study. Number 5, Rania, open source in the pandemic. Number 6, Nithya, why have an open source club? Number 7, Michael, you can do it too. Here's how. Now please welcome our very own Mr. Stu Keroff.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Stu Keroff, and I'm a believer in the power of open source software to transform a school because I'm a witness to it each time I go to work. I'm the technology integrationist at Aspen Academy, and when I'm not teaching the kids or helping the adults, you'll find me down here in the lab getting another computer ready to use. Some people find it strange that I'm not a coder or a sysadmin by trade. I'm actually licensed as a social studies teacher, and it's time for a history lesson. In the early 2000s, my wife and I saved up to buy our first new computer. I was starting back to school to get my teacher's license, and it took all of our money just to get the computer. We couldn't afford Microsoft Office, and I needed software for school. No problem, I thought. There was a promotion at work, I'd get a bonus, and we would buy it. Well, the end of the promotion came, my sales did not, and I didn't get the extra money. Great. What do I do now? I needed to write papers, and I had no software to do it with. I called up a friend who worked in tech and asked him if he could install Microsoft Office on my computer, knowing that I was asking him to cheat a little bit. Instead of just driving over to my house with a disk, he said, "Why don't you try OpenOffice? It's open source and you can get it for free." Open source? I had heard that term before in an article about this thing called Linux, but I wasn't familiar with anything released under an open source license. I went to the OpenOffice website, read a little about it, downloaded the program, and hoped for the best. And my eyes were opened. This program, even in its early version, was great. I could write papers, I could make slideshows, I could complete classwork. It was just what I needed, and programmers out there somewhere had collaborated together to make it and give it away so folks like me could use it. This open source idea was amazing. It was truly transformative technology because it could help people with limited resources get what they needed. I could get good software from people who were making it because they wanted to share their ideas and their code. I loved this idea. Later, I started to use Linux, a computer operating system released under an open source license. At first, it was a hobby. Then I started using it in my teacher work. To me, using open source at school was a no-brainer. Schools lack money, Linux was free, and it worked better on old computers than Windows did. Why wouldn't schools use it? What I found was there's a huge gulf between the world of open source and the world of public education. You're all familiar with Venn diagrams, right? Two overlapping circles, compare and contrast. This slide has a Venn diagram showing the relationship between open source and public education. The circles do not overlap. They don't even touch. They just sit there next to each other. These worlds have absolutely nothing to do with each other. It makes no sense. But the idea of open collaboration and sharing stuck with me. Open source had helped me. Could I take what I'd learned and use it to help others? The answer was yes. Since I was a teacher, the best place to start was at school. I founded the first 2 school Linux clubs in Minnesota, the Community School of Excellence Asian Penguins and the Aspen Academy Penguin Corps. Both programs started with kids having fun learning something new, and both ended up using open source to help people. First, the Asian Penguins at Community School of Excellence in St. Paul. They were the start of an experiment. Get kids using Linux and see what happens. The results of the experiment are in. This works. Having kids using open source in school helps the kids, helps the school, and helps the community. The Asian Penguins started in 2011 when I got some Linux desktop computers for my classroom. My students loved the computers and started coming into my room after school to use them. The kids were Asian, the mascot of Linux was a penguin, and so the Asian Penguins was born. Those kids who started it became a movement that eventually included over 250 members over 8 years, with the club impacting hundreds more through recycling and giving away computers. We even did crowdfunding and other forms of fundraising to get more computers and carts for the school, along with taking in laptop donations. At one time, our school had 4 laptop carts, all running Linux. Cost to the school? Practically nothing. In 2019, I came to Aspen Academy and continued the experiment. I had said any school could do this, and I still say that. But then it was time to prove it. I started a new club to learn about open source. The Penguin Corps started with 14 students and grew to impact hundreds more by refurbishing old computers for their fellow classmates. At Aspen Academy, the use of Linux at school quickly grew beyond the club because it could be implemented around the school without interrupting the technology solutions already being used. In fact, it complemented them. The school uses Chromebook carts checked out by teachers. I recycled a bunch of laptops with Linux so my classroom could have its own laptop set. And that meant that there was one fewer teacher who needed the carts. When I became the tech integrationist, the computer lab became my classroom. At the same time, our subscription to the software running the lab computers expired. No problem. Let's not waste money renewing it. We'll just use Linux here for free. And on it went. But I was never doing the work alone. The way it works is this: open source software plus used computers plus student techs equals more kids learn. It works. And it started from a simple idea. Get kids using Linux and see what happens. But enough of my yakking. What do you say? Let's get the kids in here and let them tell the story. Thank you very much. Up first from the students is Mohammed.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm Mohammed. As you heard Cam say, we are trying to change the world. I'm happy to report that every once in a while we succeed. Let me tell you about it. In the Penguin Corps, we have weekly meetings. At those meetings, we select a leader to be the master of ceremonies and get things going. We always start the same way. The leader asks us, "What are we trying to do?" We respond, "Change the world." The leader asks, "How do you change the world?" We reply, "Be crazy enough to think you can." That gets things started on a positive note, and we're excited about whatever we're doing that day. Lesson starts for us with learning how to install software. This isn't just apps, but also the operating system itself. And doing it in Linux is very different from doing it in Windows. Most of these computers we work on, people thought they were old, outdated, and useless. But with Linux, we revived them. They are currently in the several classrooms in our school and were used by hundreds of our students during distance learning. Some of the lessons we used came from those FLOSS desktops for kids curriculum from the open source initiative. It has a lot of good ideas that really worked for us. Its author, Patrick Masson, wanted to see if schools have a resource for doing this kind of stuff. We recommend it. Most people today think installing software means simply clicking a button that says install. Well, that could be done in a Linux world too, but we found it's way more fun to open up a terminal window and type in the commands. In fact, all members of the Penguin Corps learned how to do this. We never made it a requirement because everyone wanted to do it anyway. I enjoy it too. As I mentioned, we refurbish computers. We work on old computers that either the school didn't want anymore or the people gave to us. What if these computers were placed with students that didn't have one? You'll learn more about this from Rania, but here's a preview. We closed our school's digital divide. We also provided computers for our school. We set up full classroom sets of laptops for a few middle school classrooms and station sets for every elementary classroom, along with putting PCs in our school media center. Lots of kids were helped this way. When our school went to distance learning, both in March and December of 2020, more computers were needed for kids at home. We provided those up too, along with keeping a supply of extras in the office in case something needed to be replaced. On September 27th, we started a new project. Our case study is to test the idea of a one-to-one program using Linux and used computers. Our program is the only one we can find that is one-to-one with Linux, used computers, and student techs. From there, we went to present at conferences just like this one and started a YouTube channel. Feel free to subscribe to us. On January 18th, our school went to distance learning again, and once again, we got computers ready to go to our students' homes. You know what they say about all work and no play, right? We end each season at the Penguin Corps by having a party. We get to have fun playing games, and we eat a lot of snacks. Well, you might be asking, what impact do we have? For starters, some of our teachers don't need to check out the computer cards again because they have computers in their rooms. Again, those were computers nobody else wanted. Since 2019, our school's learner user base has grown from 0 to hundreds of students. We are learning tech skills that you won't learn from anywhere else, at least not yet. But let's not forget that we closed our school's digital divide at times we really needed it. Thank you all for listening. Or as I and some others say it, Mahassanat.
Hi, I'm Jeffrey Morrison. This is my second year in the Penguin Corps, but only my first conference. If you want to capture this moment, put your face next to the computer screen right now to take a selfie with me. Good, got that taken care of. You just heard Mohammed talk about many of the activities of a Penguin Corps. I'm going to focus on one of those, which we believe will be one of our most important. A big part of what we do with tech is taking used computers having kids fix them up, and then putting them into kids' homes or some of our classrooms. Let me be the first to admit that in comparison to how other schools handle tech, what we do is pretty unusual, and that can make it hard for some other schools to understand. But what if we took our methods and applied them to how other schools do computers? This year, we launched a case study project. The focus is on doing things with technology that other schools do, specifically one-to-one device programs and checkout carts. But we're doing them with the Penguin Core model. What is that, you ask? The Penguin Core model consists of 3 parts. The first part is Linux and open source software. This stuff is free, so aren't more schools using it? The second part is use computers. Since Linux works great on older software, this is an easy way to stretch your tech budget. The third part is student technicians like me. The Penguin Core is about providing tech for kids to use, but it's also about providing opportunities for kids to learn about tech. And as it turns out, having a lot of hands to help makes the program a lot easier to manage. In the spring of 2021, Aspen Academy got a grant for the Penguin Core to use for this project. We got 55 computers from the Minnesota Surplus Exchange. 25 would be for the one-to-one program, 25 would be for the checkout cart, and 5 would be spares just in case something broke. We also bought laptop bags from the Surplus Exchange and 2 charging carts. The laptops came to the school in July, and Mr. Keroff invited us to come to the building for an Install Fest, where we got as many of the laptops going on the OS and apps. We came back to the school in the fall. We met with Mr. Keroff to come up with a new user agreement just for us, and we got to help write the rules for the program. Then, each one of us had to have a parent sign the user agreement and meet a release form, for stuff like this. On September 27th, we got our laptops for the first time. We structured our program on the one-to-one so that the one-to-one laptops stayed at school, but we got to take them from class to class through the day. This saves on stuff getting lost or broken. On October 13th, we started Phase 2, a Linux checkout cart, for teachers who want to have laptops for one class period or more. For using either set of laptops, though, there is a catch. For us penguins in the one-to-one program, the catch is that we have to fill out a survey every 2 to 3 weeks on our experience with the laptops. This data will be used to write a report next summer on how the whole thing went. For the checkout cart, any teacher who wants to use it has to fill out a survey on how things went in class with the laptops. This is only February, so the project is still a work in progress. However, I can report on some preliminary data. To avoid getting real boring, I'll summarize. The kids overall think the program is awesome and they love the laptops. They are also satisfied with the speed of the machines and functionality of included software. The program is a great success so far. Worth bringing up is the fact that 1 cart of our laptops in open source software costs only a fifth of what a school like ours spends on the same number of Chromebooks and a cart. That is definitely worth remembering, folks. Here's a screenshot of me with my laptop from our YouTube video on the project. And yes, I do think my laptop is pretty cool. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for listening.
Hi, I'm Rania Ahmed. Hopefully you've gotten the point that this is not just something we do, but something we believe in. For the past 2 years, the whole world has been shaken by the changes brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic. Millions of people have gotten sick, many have died, and just about every part of society has been affected. Business, government, travel, and yes, education. My mom sees this up close because she's a pharmacist. She complains about the amount of work they have to do brought on by COVID-19 and uses the word burnout a lot. They are now administering COVID testing and COVID vaccines in addition to filling prescriptions, and many of her coworkers have either retired early or left the profession altogether. I hear similar horror stories from my aunt, a nurse working at a major hospital. But first, the change. In March 2020, schools everywhere were converted to distance learning. All of you were there, so you know it was definitely a change. Any kid will tell you that attending school from home is tough, but what about the kids who didn't have computers? Or the families who didn't have enough computers for all the kids in the house? What were they supposed to do? Like other schools, Aspen Academy was affected by COVID, but unlike other schools, Aspen Academy had us. Let me explain. At the time, our school didn't have enough computers to put in the homes of those kids. Aspen leaders reached out to the Penguin Corps to create a solution. The first thing we needed to do was survey parents to find out which families needed computers. Armed with that information, we got to work. We installed Linux on computers the school had stopped using. These computers were sitting on a shelf, waiting for the recycler, and we gave them away. More families asked for computers, and we realized the supply we had would not be close to enough. It was time to think bigger. Our team had reached out over Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and the local newspaper asking for computer donations. A whole bunch of people, and even some businesses responded. Laptops started to pour in. Most of them worked, but some needed minor repairs, such as new batteries or other parts. All the computers needed new software. Linux was the solution. We got the computers up and running, and the school handed them out. From the middle of March 2020 to the first week of May, we gave away 60 computers. This closed the digital divide we had at the time, as Aspen classes were asynchronous and kids could share computers at home. Then the school started up again in the fall, and Aspen Academy was told at the last minute that we would have to go hybrid. This meant that all the kids in the school would spend at least part of the week attending live classes online. Instantly, every single student needed a device, and demand went through the roof. Again, we appealed online to get donations. We also bought used computers from the Minnesota Surplus Exchange, where we could get them cheap. Then the school started to hand them out. The job was tougher than we imagined it would be. At our open house in August, we handed out 132 laptops, which was awesome, but it still wasn't enough. We compiled a waiting list and continued to get computers ready, giving them out over the next few weeks. Finally, by October, we got to the last kid on our list. We handed out over 300 computers. Yes, you heard me, over 300 computers. But this was expensive, right? Wrong. Most of the computers were donated, with us buying just a few parts. Our biggest cost was buying refurbished computers from the state, but they were just a fraction of buying new. As of right now, our total cost was about $7,000. We saved our school over $150,000. During that time, other schools were having trouble even finding computers because of the supply line problems. But our students were taken care of because of open source and used computers. It can be done. But the commitment to help through the pandemic never really ended because the pandemic itself hasn't ended yet. In January of this year, we went on distance learning again. And because of the groundwork we had already laid, we did not have to buy any new computers to help our students this time around. All of this won Aspen Academy the 2021 MESPA SPEM Innovation Award. That feels great, but it feels even better to know that we made a difference. Thank you for listening. This has been Rania.
Hello, my name is Nithya Gunduru, and I'm glad you came. And if you weren't before, within the next few minutes, you're going to be glad you came too. We do Linux and open source at school, and very few schools choose to do that. For us, that meant that at some point of time, we had to convince our school leaders to do something that most of their peers weren't doing. We must have been pretty persuasive. I hope you're feeling persuadable. You've heard my team talk about how we use Linux at school. Now, I'd like to talk about why. I'm about to give you some reasons why you should start a Linux club at your school. Some of you might ask, why do we need something like that? I say, that's not the kind of thing for us. We believe that any school can do this, and maybe the next school could be yours. Let's talk about some reasons. The program is affordable. All the software is free, and if you're using old computers, you don't have to pay a lot for them. Something else to keep in mind, people like to help kids. When they hear you're running a club or kids recycle computers, they will give you computers. And when you fundraise for a kids computer club, people will give you money. Linux can bring old computers back to life. This not only saves money, but it reduces e-waste. And the last time I checked, this planet produces way too much e-waste. You also help people. You help kids learn. In a Linux club, we learn how to do all this stuff. We learn how to install software, fix and upgrade computers, and all sorts of other skills. These are in-demand skills. According to the 2020 Open Source Jobs Report from the Linux Foundation, 81% of hiring managers said that open source talent was important to them, and 93 of them said it was hard to find qualified help. Numbers like that speak for themselves. You help people outside of the school. If your school doesn't need computers, many of your school's families usually do. That was the case for us. When you give an old computer to a kid, you're helping the family too. You help the school itself. The Penguin Corps refurbished enough laptops to help hundreds of kids in their homes during distance and hybrid learning. When those computers came back, we put them in classrooms. Now that we are in distance learning again, many went back out to help kids. It's fun. That should be enough reason for anyone. But it seems some people are resistant to bringing Linux into their schools. It's time to overcome a few common objections. Lack of technical know-how. Maybe your school doesn't have a Linux expert right now. We didn't either when we started. Mr. Keroff learned as he went along. Another example is Robert Litt, who started a Linux program at his Oakland, California school. He said, "When I started, I didn't know a darn thing." He learned, and so can you. Lack of computers. Like I mentioned earlier, used computers are cheap and not hard to find. You don't need to spend a lot on this. Linux doesn't have the software we want for students. While there may be some programs unavailable for Linux, they're usually open source equivalents, allowing a school to use a different program for the same learning goals. Also, the last we checked, most computer use at schools these days is through the browser. As a result, Schoology, Google Classroom, and iExcel all work great on Linux. But I know what you're thinking. We've forgotten something that is a big deal in every school. Standardized testing. Here are the facts. Linux can be used for pretty much any browser-based test, and both Pearson and DRC make versions of their test apps for Linux. At his last two schools, Mr. Keroff used Linux for FastBridge, NWEA, MCAs, and Access for ELLs. This is a picture of Mr. Keroff's computer lab. It uses 100% Linux and 100% used computers. These have already been used for testing this year and will be again in the coming months. Cost? A few $100s for some batteries. That's for 32 working computers. As you can see, there are lots of reasons why a school should use Linux and not a lot of reasons not to. It's affordable, people get helped, and kids have fun. And maybe, by the end of this, you'll consider using Linux at your school too. Thanks for listening.
Hello, I'm Michael Martin. We believe that open source belongs in schools and have invested a lot of time and effort into making this happen here. It seems that middle school is an ideal place to make this happen. Middle school kids love computers and have enough free time to do something like this. They're also just starting to notice the world around them and the impact they can have on it. But this goes both ways. In fact, the open source world needs schools too. Where do you think future IT professionals are right now? They're in class. The open source world and education will do not intersect very often. And if we change that, we change everything. You can be part of the solution by starting an open source program at your middle school. If Nithya did her job properly and persuaded you and overcame all of your objections, here's some of the things you'll need to get started. A supervisor. This could be you or one of your teachers. You just need somebody with a do-it-yourself attitude. Tech experience is not necessary because you can learn as you go along. The go-ahead from the administration. Your school probably has clubs and is looking for more ideas for clubs and more adults to run them. Make yourself available. Computers. Remember, they don't have to be new ones. Software. You will need an operating system and apps. And when you use Linux, then you'll get the software for free. Administrators love the word free. Kids. Obviously, that's kind of the whole point. Not sure how to start? Tip 1. Start small. Use the link yourself. I recommend starting with Ubuntu, but there are many other versions to choose from. I guarantee you will find one that fits you. A couple of resources you can use would include the FLOSS Desktop for Kids curriculum from the Open Source Initiative. We use some of their lessons. Another is a Linux Club Guide, written by our very own Mr. Keroff. The guide gives a lot of helpful suggestions about how to get a Linux club started and make it fun. It's available online at www.linuxclubguide.com. Recruit kids. It's not that hard. They will love it. And I'm telling you this from personal experience. Get computers. This is easier than you think. Remember, they don't have to be new. Many people, even some businesses, will want to give you computers for your club. Your school probably has some they don't need anymore. And there are plenty of places to get computers cheaply. We often go to the Minnesota Surplus Exchange, where we have gotten incredible deals. And there are many thrift stores, Free Geek, local recyclers, and eBay. We've gotten computers from all of these sources, and so can you. Do hardware and software lessons. Use stuff from a curriculum or tips you see online. Or just make something up. Learn right alongside your kids. Remember, if you really screw something up and your computer stops working, just grab an install drive and start all over. Open source software gives you the freedom to do whatever you want. Our biggest project became our school's digital divide. We closed it, not once, but a total of 3 times at bargain basement rates. Maybe this is what your school needs. The formula is simple. Open source software plus used computers plus student text equals more kids learn. It works. If you want to specifically do a one-to-one program or a checkout cart, like our case study, based on our experience, we can recommend a few things. Try to stick to one model of computer, or at least very few different models. This allows you to interchange chargers, batteries, and sometimes parts if necessary. Decide what activities your club will be doing before choosing software. Google Chrome is an obvious choice for your browser, but you can only install TestNav on certain Linux distros. If you will use the computers for testing, that will make some choices for you. Go over the rules of the program with your students before giving them the laptops. In fact, have them write the rules, help write the rules. Have a checkout cart. Have a checkout system for the carts so you can keep track of them. If you do a one-to-one program, make sure each student has laptop bags before you hand out the computers. We haven't had a single computer break yet because of this. This isn't just about having fun. This is about making a difference. Do you want to change the world? Start by being crazy enough to think you can. Thank you very much. Or as we say in Russian, спасибо.